So I have been delaying making this video for probably about 3 weeks, and that is the All Blacks squad prediction. Now, it is extremely tough at the moment, and I wanted to leave it as late as possible because of all the injuries that we've seen, but also there are so many players in the running that I was kind of hoping a couple of them would lose form so that it made it a lot easier. That hasn't really happened, so this is going to be tough, but a 32-man squad, 18 forwards, 14 backs. I'm still undecided on quite a few of these positions, and I should also mention some of these I've gone with what I feel Razor will do as opposed to myself, and then others I've gone with what I would do rather than what maybe Razor would do. But we will jump straight into it. Of course, do let me know who you guys would have in your 32-man squad in the comments down below. But we are starting with the props. In my propping department, I have got 5 props. I've got Ofa Tuangafasi. I feel he's had a great season for the Blues. He's actually scored himself quite a few tries. They've looked strong in scrums. I think he's one of the big reasons for that. So Ofa Tuangafasi, I'm putting him in my All Blacks team. Fletcher Null, his scrummaging, I think is what sets him apart a little bit because he doesn't have too many runs of the ball. But when he's in a scrum, I mean, we've seen that dominance that the Crusaders have been able to have at stages throughout the Super Rugby Pacific competition. Not all of it, of course, because they were knocked out relatively early compared to what a lot of people thought, but he's still been very strong, Fletcher Null, so that is why I've got him as one of the 2 tight head props. And then the other tight head prop I've gone with is Tyrell Lomax. I know he had a bit of an injury earlier on in the season. He's returned now, and he does look very handy. Ethan de Groot, the next prop that I've gone with, the Southlander, who just seems to not quite be able to catch a break at the moment. The Highlanders, they had a much better season this year than some did anticipate, but there's still a lot of, to say it nicely, weak links in that Highlanders side. Maybe not as much name value as some of the other teams, but someone who does seem to step up in those important games is Ethan de Groot, and he's also got that scrummaging, just like Fletcher Null, that I think will be extremely impressive for the All Blacks. And then the last prop that I've gone with Tamaiti Williams. Few of these guys can actually play loose head and tight head, so that will help with the versatility of this All Blacks side. Now, honourable mentions, I mean, there's quite a few, to be honest. There's been some great seasons coming from Super Rugby Pacific. Xavier Numia, I would have had him in if it wasn't for his injury. I don't really know the extent of some of the injuries we have seen throughout Super Rugby Pacific, because later on you will see a player who we thought was out for the season is now back playing in the Super Rugby Pacific final. Another player who maybe could have got a bit of a shout, I'll say it, is Angus Ta'avao. I think he's had pretty good season off the bench for the Blues. And who knows, maybe for the Rugby Championship, we see a couple other guys make their way in. Of course, dependent on if we see injuries, because there are still a lot of players in this squad that I've selected that are playing in the Super Rugby Pacific final, one of which being Ofa Tuangafasi. We don't know how that game is going to go. The man could end up with a hamstring, a calf, an arm, anything could happen in that final. So a lot of these guys are still a little bit uncertain. Definitely those ones playing in the final. But now we move on to the hookers. I've got Asafa Moore. He is a man who has had an injury throughout the season, but now that he's back, he's just a bulldozer. He runs over defenders. His line-out game has come an extremely long way over the last 2 or so years. I remember back when he was getting a few opportunities for the ABs, people always mentioned about that line-out and said that that was something that was hurting him. A little bit similar to what Joseph Dweba experiences for the Springboks, how that line-out accuracy was actually the thing letting him down, because he had all the power in the world, just didn't quite know how to get that technicality of the line-out right. But Asafa Moore come a long way this season to a certain extent. I think he could even maybe start for the All Blacks ahead of this next man, Cody Taylor, who I've also selected. Just based off current form, I'll be honest, Cody Taylor hasn't got the best form heading into this All Blacks season, but he hasn't had a huge amount of games for the Crusaders either, so maybe as he gets more game time, he will start to find his rhythm a little bit more. I think that experience in the front row as well will be extremely handy. And another reason that I say that is because of who I've gone with as the third hooker. Now, Samisoni Taukei'aho, if he is not injured, which I think he will be for the first games of the year anyway for the All Blacks, he would have been my third choice. I've left him out with the assumption that he is not going to be available. I could have gone Ricky Riccatelli. I could have gone Kurt Eklund. But I've actually gone with a bolter here. Now, of course, we know that Razor coached the Crusaders for a very long time, and we are yet to find out how much loyalty he has to that side when it comes to his selection. But for my third hooker, I've gone with George Bell. Now, it's a little bit of a long shot, but he had a pretty decent Super Rugby Pacific season. And the reason that I've also selected him is because he's got age on his side. Ricky Riccatelli, he's 29. So by the time we get to that next Rugby World Cup, he's going to be looking at 33. And I think because we're in a new World Cup cycle, maybe Razor will try and bump that average age down a little bit, which is also why I've got a couple other players missing later on. But George Bell could be a bolter, could be a guy who gets himself in and possibly finds himself in a peak position going into that Rugby World Cup in 2027. But now we are up to the locks. This is another department that's had quite a few injuries, and of course, they've lost the experience. They don't have Brodie Retallick, they don't have Sam Whitelock anymore in this lock-in duo. So there is going to be a little bit of an adjustment period for the men who are selected at lock. And I've actually gone a little bit overboard with the locking duo because I've got 5 locks in this All Black squad. Do I think this is what the selectors will do? Probably not. But I also am very indecisive, so it made it a bit easier for picking who I would select. So I've got Scott Barrett. That is, of course, relying on the fact that he doesn't have an injury heading into the All Black season. Tupavai, I've gone with. He is going to be playing in the final, so hopefully gets out of that injury-free. Patrick Tuipulotu. Now, he is one that a lot of people felt his season was over in the last contest that he played in. But he's now back and playing in the Super Rugby Pacific final. He's a little bit of an uncertainty for me whether or not he will actually be match fit going into those first matches for the ABs up against England. So as a backup for him, I'm actually going to say maybe Isaiah Walker-Leawiri is another option. Now, not so much based off his form because the man has given away a lot of penalties. He's had a huge amount of handling errors throughout this season. But up against a side like England, you do want a bit more bulk in your forward pack, and I feel like that's something that maybe Walker-Leawiri could offer ahead of some of the other locking options. But in my original locks that I've selected here, Walker-Leawiri is not one of them. I've also got Sam Derry and I've also got Quinton Strange. Now, the reason that I've gone with 5 locks is because Scott Barrett as well as Tupavai also offer 6. So that is another option. And I mean, we've seen it in the past that Barrett has gone to blindside. Like I mentioned, up against England, you want a bit more bulk in your forward pack as it may be more of a forward-orientated game. So Barrett could actually transition to blindside, and then you'd still have your 4 locks. As I mean, last year was the perfect example for the All Blacks, where the lock stocks just kept on getting thinner and thinner with the amount of injuries that we did see occurring in that position. But now onto the loose forwards, and because I've gone with 5 locks, it means that I've only got 5 loose forwards, as the All Blacks are going with the 18 forwards, and those loose forwards are as follows. Sama Penifine now. His discipline concerns me a little bit, I'll be honest, but he's got that size about him, and he does seem to be able to really get the momentum shifting forward for the Chiefs throughout the season. Got minimal opportunities for the All Blacks last year, and I feel like he's one of those players that could really cement that number 6 jersey, mainly because of the fact that Shannon Frizzell is overseas, and Akira Ioane also going to Japan next year. Does mean that more than likely he will be missing out. I've got Dalton Papali'i. He's made 200 tackles throughout the Super Rugby Pacific season, tackling at a 94% accuracy. So he's certainly handy enough when it comes to making those tackles. Good in a breakdown as well. So that is why Dalton is going to be in my loose forwards. Ardie Savea. He is one of those players that, to be honest, we don't really know where Razor's going to play him. Is he going to transition back to 7? Is he going to be an option as the number 8? I have got him in the squad here as a number 8, but he can still play that 7 as well, of course, if needed. Hoskins Sotutu, 12 tries throughout the Super Rugby Pacific season, also having 20 offloads along the way. When you talk about being able to create little opportunities, he's had a lot of try assists for the Blues as well, just from that offload. But yeah, 12 tries kind of speaks for itself. He's a very strong player when the side are attacking. Just the one critique that I would have for Sotutu is the fact that for the amount of minutes that he's played throughout the season, he hasn't actually made that many tackles. Like, he's made 138 of his 159 attempted, but compared to some of the other number 8s in the competition, they have actually made a lot more, and maybe that is just down to the fact that the Blues are such a strong side when it comes to their attack that they haven't had to defend as much. But overall, I feel like he can't be in any better form heading into the season. Of course, after missing out on that Rugby World Cup squad, he felt like he had something to prove. Feel like it's made him a stronger player and hopefully get some opportunities for the All Blacks this year. And that just leaves one more loose forward. Now, at the moment, I should mention I have not said the name Sam Cane. I have not said Cullen Grace, who I know a lot of people have felt like could have maybe made a run for the All Blacks once again. I haven't said Peter Lakai, haven't said Braden Yossi, Duplessis Karefi, 3 men for the Hurricanes, who have been in some pretty good form throughout the Super Rugby Pacific season. And then when you look at the Chiefs, I haven't said Jacobson, and I haven't said Wallace Satiti, who a lot of people are feeling could be a bolter for this year's All Blacks. I do think they may just give him one more season, though, of club rugby and Super Rugby before they chuck Satiti in the deep end. Definitely because they've already got that specialist 8 in Satutu, as well as Savia as another option at 8. But for me, I did go with Peter Lakai. I just feel like he's got that X factor at the moment. It honestly does remind me of a young Savia in a really good way. 156 carries for that man throughout the season. He has been working extremely hard. The fact that I've got 3 men who can play 7, of course, is pretty handy. Got 2 men who can play the 6, 2 men that can play the 8. So we've got that versatility there if they go with these players. But I do honestly feel like Peter Lakai is going to be there for the next Rugby World Cup. Unless, of course, something happens that either causes injury or him going overseas. He's just got that really good, strong style about him. And I'm looking forward to seeing if he's one of the players who are selected. But now we move on to the backs. Now, we could only select 14 of these men, which really annoyed me because I'm extremely indecisive. As you guys know, even just picking that 4-pack, I had about 20 honourable mentions. And like I said, we've been waiting till the very last minute to do this video because I'm so indecisive and can't really make up my mind. But halfbacks, this is an interesting one. TJ Perenara, I have gone with as the first halfback. Some people really do not like the idea of Perenara being back into the All Blacks. I think, though, with the fact that they do not have Aaron Smith this year, with the fact that they don't have Brad Weber, they've got not a lot of experience available, and I know people say that they should pick them off form in terms of the halfbacks, but honestly, Perenara has had a pretty decent season for the Hurricanes. He scored a lot of tries. He is now pretty clear of Julian Savia when it comes to overall try scorers in Super Rugby's history. Does look like he's still got plenty left in the tank for Perenara, so I've decided to go with him as almost like a player, but also a little bit of a mentor for the other 2 players that I've got. And those 2 are Cortez Ratima and Folau Fakatava. Now, we knew that there wasn't going to be a Roy guard due to his injury. Finley Christie, he has been out for most of the season, but he's come back, and to his credit, he's actually been playing pretty well for the Blues over the last few weeks. But then saying that, not to discredit anything that Christie has done this season, but when you're on a side like the Blues and in the form that the Blues are in, it is hard to not look like you're doing well as a halfback when that side is going forward as much as they are. But he is also an option. Maybe they look at him rather than Folau Fakatava. Maybe they look at him rather than TJ Perenara looking towards that next World Cup, which of course TJ more than likely will not be at. So they have to make the big decision, but I've gone with TJ for that experience. And one of those tough, grindy games up against England, if it's coming down to the wire, I feel like he's the type of player you want out there on the field to be able to close out the game. But now we're on to first fives. Number 1, Damian McKenzie. I feel like his season has really spoken for itself with Mo'unga going overseas, with Barrett being overseas, but he is now eligible, of course, to play for the All Blacks. But it seemed like McKenzie was destined to get this chance, and the way that he's played throughout Super Rugby, he's had 42 defenders beaten, he's had 172 points throughout the season for the Chiefs, so more than likely he could also be the kicking option for the All Blacks if he was to take on that 10 jersey. So he is one of the 2 that I've gone with, and the other, little bit of a bolter here as well, but I've actually gone with Harry Plummer of the Blues. He's had 94 points throughout this Super Rugby Pacific season, although he hasn't had as many opportunities as someone like a Damian McKenzie. He's found himself having to work really hard to get minutes, but anytime he's been on the field, for this season in particular, he's actually really stepped up. I know that they've had injuries of Sullivan, which then caused Perofeta to go into the 15 jersey, gave Plummer a bit more of a chance to shine at fly half, and I honestly don't think he'd do too badly in a match for the All Blacks. The other player who was maybe in the running for a possible bolter there would have been maybe Brett Cameron, but just in the big games, it seemed like he wasn't really able to step up to that same level, plus still seems a little green. So that is why I did end up going with Harry Plummer. But now we're on to the centres, and this is where we start causing a little bit of controversy, ladies and gentlemen, because, like I mentioned, it's a mix of what I would do and what Razor would do that I have gone with my selections here, and there are some big players that I've left out, not just in the centres, but also in the outside backs. Do I think that these players will be left out? Probably not. But is it worth giving a couple other players a bit of a mention before the start of the All Black season? Absolutely. So that is why in the centres, ladies and gents, we have gone with Quinn Tupaia. I think that what he has done for the Chiefs throughout this season has been sensational. He has come back from a pretty serious injury and seems like he's really picked up from where he left off. His work in the breakdown is something that I think makes him a little bit different to some of these other centres that I've gone with. And it does really remind me of kind of what a Jonathan Dante does or a Bundy Aki does in terms of Northern Hemisphere sides, just locking himself over that ball and managing to get those turnovers. His running game is strong as well. And to partner with him for one of the All Blacks combinations that I think that they may try in the centres, I've gone with Anton Lienert-Brown. That man has probably had his best Super Rugby season for an extremely long time, if not maybe his best ever season for the Chiefs. He's had defenders beaten. He's had try assists. He's actually doubled the try assists of a few of the other players that we are going to be mentioning just a little bit later on. But I honestly feel like if he doesn't get selected this time for the All Blacks, something's gone wrong, because he can play 12, he can play 13, and he's always been known as a relatively solid player. He'll give you a pretty good showing, but I think this season he's shown that he does still have that X factor and can actually turn it up to that next level when it's needed. Another player that I've gone with in the centres, this one, I don't know if it's so much controversial, because maybe based off form, you'd say there have been a few other players who are a little bit stronger, but I've gone with Jordie Barrett here. He's had 17 offloads throughout the season. That was his highest stat that I could find on him. Of course, he's got that kicking game, one of the biggest boots around, and we've got to remember what he was able to do for the All Blacks last year, and I feel like that's a little bit of what the selection's based off as well. Like, some of these guys I've picked off form, but others I have picked purely off the ability that we know that they have, and Jordie Barrett's one of those guys that for the All Blacks, he can change a game. And yes, maybe his last performance he wasn't able to do so for the ABs, but he was still one of those players throughout that World Cup that did thoroughly impress me, so that is why I've gone with Jordie Barrett as one of the centres. And now the last centre that I've gone with, Billy Proctor, which does mean that in this selection I have not got Rieko Ioane. Now that is one that I'm sure will rub a lot of people the wrong way. Definitely because I just mentioned about picking players based off what they've done in the past rather than sometimes off current form. But for Rieko, when looking through at the stats for the season, Proctor was schooling him in a majority of them, as well as Anton Lienert-Brown. Like, both of the two that I mentioned there, Lienert-Brown and Proctor, had way more defenders beaten. They have way more running meters. Like, Rieko has had a very quiet season for the Blues, and it's not necessarily his fault, because to a certain extent, they've just had so many try-scoring options for the Blues throughout this season, which we will get into for the outside backs, that maybe he hasn't been expected to score many tries. But he just, for me this season, in the nicest way possible, he just doesn't have his X factor that he had in the past. Like, we used to expect Rieko Ioane to beat 10 defenders or 5 defenders a game, and he'd carve gaps, he'd scored tries. He's on 49 at the moment for the Blues. He's been on 49 tries for 400 days, and that man still hasn't got his 50th. Is it coming in the final? Probably. Is he going to get a hat trick to shut me up? Probably. But he just we want to see him score tries, and that could come down to the fact that a lot of people still feel like he's a winger, but he's gone into the centres. He partners well with Barrett, which I think might be one reason that they do select him over someone like a Billy Proctor, although that does have the Hurricanes chemistry, if you're going that way about it. But I just felt like Proctor deserved a little bit of a honourable mention here. And the thing is, if he doesn't get selected for the side, of course we will be talking about Rieko Ioane a lot throughout the All Blacks season, so this was my chance of giving Proctor a little bit of that shout out before maybe he doesn't get his chance. Maybe they look at Quintal Pyatt losing his spot for Rieko Ioane. But once again, based off form, I feel like you go to Pyatt every day of the week. But now we're on to the outside backs. And man, did it take days and days to try and work out who I was going with here. The only benefit I had was the fact that a couple of the players seemed like they were injured enough that they wouldn't be eligible. But now it seems like all those injuries are okay and that they will be match fit and available for selection. So my outside backs, this is still very much a question mark as well, ladies and gents, in terms of who I have selected here. I've got Amoni Narawa, I've got Sevu Reece, Mark Talia, Caleb Clark, and then for the fullback, I've gone with Shaun Stevenson. Now, he is playing in the Super Rugby Pacific final, and he also pulled out late of the semi-final because of an injury. So I've got him there as a massive question mark because I honestly do feel if he plays in this final and he gets a lot of minutes, there is a high chance that he walks away with an injury from this game. So as the backup there, I've actually got Ruben Love, who, as we know, already has an injury of his own, dealing with that knee trouble. So then as a backup for him, that is where I've got Beauden Barrett. But in my original 32-man squad, I don't actually have Beauden Barrett in there. Now, that is another one that splits opinion. Some feel like Barrett's experience does have to be in that All Black squad somewhere. There are some others, though, that feel like maybe the fact that he's been playing in Japan throughout this year rather than in New Zealand means that he isn't as high up in the rankings as he would be if he was playing in Super Rugby Pacific. But then the other argument for that is he could be a lot fresher than some of the guys who are playing in Super Rugby, such as Stevenson and Love, who I've mentioned already, have both got injuries that they are dealing with. We look at someone like Azan Sullivan. He is injured at the moment. Perofeta, he had a patch where he was a little bit injured. I think he's back now, though, to 100%, or at least putting on a brave face, I think is the better way of putting it. So Stevenson, kind of in there as my 15, but then also Ruben Love and Beauden Barrett as the two backups. I couldn't decide out of the four players of the outside backs who to get rid of. They've all had such great seasons. Amoni Narawa, 10 tries. 12 tries for Sevu Reece. 9 tries for Mark Talia. Caleb Clark, first in the clean break stat. 48 defenders beaten. 1,128 metres carried. Almost an extra 150 on any of the others that I mentioned. So Clark has his spot in the All Blacks, at least maybe under this Razor selection. But does he? There's a lot of questions in that outside backs department. But I honestly feel like all of them would be worthy of being in there. Narawa, Talia, Clark, and Stevenson are all going to be in action for the Super Rugby Pacific final. So an injury there may make it a little bit easier for the selectors. But there's going to be some disappointed players who have had great seasons, I think is the perfect statement to make for those outside backs, and actually also the perfect statement to make for this whole All Black side. Unfortunately, there are more than 32 informed players playing in New Zealand at the moment, and I say it's unfortunate. It's a good thing to have. Bit of competition, bit of pressure on the players as well, but at the end of the day, we can only select 32, and I'll be honest, I don't know if I've got the right 32. I do look forward to seeing the selection. It's going to be on Monday, so of course do let me know who you guys would go with. I know for a fact that there shouldn't be anyone with the exact same squad as myself, because I don't think many people are taking 5 locks. And also alongside that, I don't think many people are taking 4 wingers in their outside backs. They'd have an extra fullback, I would assume, as another option. But nonetheless, I do thank you all very much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, of course, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. We will be doing the All Black squad announcement on Monday when it takes place. It's going to be a big one. All Blacks versus England in a 2-match series, as well as the match up against the Flying Fijians in the USA, just around the corner. But thank you all very much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all for the next one.